The SEC is changing their schedule. Not everyone is pleased by it, but some people aren't pleased and yet also in favor of it. So,
what's up, everyone? Welcome to the No Huddle Football channel, where we're going to discuss some of the biggest news in college football this week. We're focusing on the SEC this week, and with the addition of the Texas Longhorns and the Oklahoma Sooners, the SEC's got a proposal for a new schedule that could start in the 2024 season. Before we get too far into this discussion, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more football updates. Hit the bell, which is right next to the subscribe button, to be notified when the videos are up. Now, there's two ideas for this season's new schedule: a 1-7 or a 3-6-6 schedule. If you're not familiar with either of these terms, we're going to explain these a little more in depth. The 1-7 schedule for SEC means one yearly opponent that is the same and 7 that are random for the rest of the SEC. The 1-7 guarantees that we're going to keep that one major conference game that has a big rivalry implications. Think Auburn, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi State, and Ole Miss. This format also allows teams an additional fourth non-conference game, which for some of the lower teams in the SEC total poll could be a favorable matchup. However, this schedule does come with some cons as well, such as a decrease in conference matchups and less competitive games in non-conference play for some of the top SEC teams. While the primary rivalries are going to stay intact, some of the other rivalries like Alabama, Tennessee, Auburn, Georgia, and other secondary matchups that garner substantial viewership for the SEC might be missed out during certain seasons with the randomized opponents. An example of this schedule, if it's deployed, could be Alabama may only play LSU every other season, with the one permanent opponent obviously going to be Auburn for a team like Alabama, or vice versa, depending on what SEC feels is more important of the two games. With the inclusion of Texas into the SEC, this reintroduces the rivalry between the Longhorns and Aggies that we've missed since the Aggies joined the SEC. Overall, this schedule will certainly miss a lot of the key matchups for the SEC. Changing some of the best yearly matchups to every other year surely will turn some of the fans away. The SEC does not want that because it will affect ratings, and the ratings affect money. The other proposal is an idea, the 3-6 model, something that Alabama head coach Nick Saban is in favor of. This allows 3 permanent opponents and 6 other conference games that will be randomized each and every other year. What this does is increase SEC play and create tougher schedule for teams. The likelihood of Alabama playing a game it's favored by 14 or more points will decrease drastically. LSU playing a game, them being up 35 before the second half decreases. This schedule will also include one less non-conference game for the big teams to beat up on an easier opponent. To be honest here, no one wants to see those types of games. On a Saturday morning or afternoon, fancy Alabama being up on some random team like Rice. Overall, Saban believes the more competition the schedule brings is better for the game, and better competition is better for the fans, which this model could promise for the SEC. Unlike the 1-7, it does allow for secondary rivalries to stay intact. So with some of the juicier matchups like Alabama, LSU, would say Alabama, Tennessee, would still be intact. Saban believes that records may not be as good as in previous years with this model, but the fan interest would increase, and that's what college football is really all about. Now, this model does create a problem in determining what 3 permanent opponents each team gets. The schedule must be balanced for each team, and this may not be as easily as determined on a win-loss record. In this podcast, The Late Kick, Josh Pate harped on this sentiment as well.
essentially, what the 3 fixed opponents will be. I know it was a projection from him. That guy's got a pretty informed ability to project these things. Let me leave it at that. LSU, Auburn, and Tennessee. Those were the 3 fixed opponents that Mr. Dellinger said you can expect Alabama to have. Nick Saban apparently buys it, because not only was Nick Saban quoted in the story, but Nick Saban also came out and said, they've got us playing Hoopst. They got us playing Auburn, LSU, and Tennessee. How in the world do they come to that? Now, you may be thinking to yourself, Nick Saban sounds scared all of a sudden. No, I've got some sound for you in a couple of minutes I'm going to play.
Look at the records alone. Tennessee is 12th with a 41.4 winning percentage, but the Volunteers beat Alabama last year 52-49 and are on the uptick with Josh Heupel at the helm. This lone factor may not be the best way of determining schedules without looking at least at a strength of schedule in those years. With OU and Texas coming into the SEC, the winning percentage of those teams sit at 78 and 54%. That places each one of them in the top 7 of the SEC coming into it. Also, this schedule is subject to being brutal for bottom teams. Some other small factors that have not been decided yet are the college football playoff expansion and tiebreaker procedures, something that neither one of these schedules is quite clear on yet. But more than anything, one factor that seems to hold more than any other influence, at least in our eyes, the big factor in this, and ultimately what can drive the SEC's decision, is money. Yep, it's a factor that fans don't want to hear and see it incorporated into sports and negotiations, but a driving force would be potential revenue gain for the SEC, or lack thereof. This is perhaps the biggest reason why a schedule is not approved already. At the end of the day, while all these schools with student athletes, the SEC at its core, it's a business. A similar situation came to head when Texas and Oklahoma left for the SEC. While both schools in the Big 12 came to an agreement a couple weeks ago, the biggest problem was TV partners Fox and ESPN. Once these sides came to an agreement with the Big 12, then the move was official. So there's a clear sign that TV partners for the SEC, which is ESPN, have some power in what the final schedule will be. The schedule does carry a significant monetary incentive for SEC if it comes to an agreement with ESPN. Since ESPN is the sole owner of the TV broadcast rights, the SEC looks for additional revenue if a 3-6 model is approved. In simple terms, a 3-6 provides more conference games, more games of broadcast, and in turn gives SEC more money. Let's wrap up with a hypothetical situation where we see the 3-6 model implemented for the three teams. For our example, we're going to use Alabama, Texas A&M, and Vanderbilt. This is solely based on SEC records in the previous 10 years, which people can already argue is skewed because Oklahoma is third best and Texas will be sixth. See, this is already proving the point how hard this is actually going to be. For this example, we're going to use Ross Dillinger's piece from Sports Illustrated for our example. First, Alabama. The three permanent games Alabama has are Auburn, LSU, and Tennessee. This favors rivalry, proximity, and puts one of the best teams against some of the other best teams in the SEC. But the remaining 6 games are tricky. If you put Alabama against Georgia, Texas A&M, any other of the top 8 teams, it could become top-heavy for the Crimson Tide, as 2 of the 3 permanent games are already against teams that, according to records from the last 10 years, are top 7 in the conference. Also, Tennessee's ranked 12th in the conference, but beat Alabama last year and is showing a major uptick again with Josh Heupel at the helm, like we spoke about earlier. We can already see where this is going. If Alabama gets scheduled some of the best teams one year, then the season after that, we're going to see them have some of the bottom winning percentages as well. So the biggest problem is finding the compromise with 9 teams left. Texas A&M sits at 8 best, and this is because Oklahoma and Texas rank higher than the Aggies do in pure winning percentage. So that is something to consider immediately if you're SEC when making a schedule. For Dillinger, he lists the Aggies' 3 permanent opponents as LSU, Texas, and Mississippi State. 2 of these 3 rank higher in winning percentage, but Texas was in the Big 12 when all that winning was going on. Again, how does that factor into this equation when making schedules? With the Aggies smack dab in the middle, there's a case that can be made that this is easier because you split the games, 3 of the higher teams one year, 3 teams lower, and seemingly gives the Aggies 5 games against 1 through 7, 4 against 9 through 16. But teams like at Tennessee, South Carolina, Missouri are in the bottom, and the case can be made that those teams could give Texas A&M a run for their money depending on the season. If you're lost, don't feel bad because the schedule will probably be just as confusing to follow than it is to construct it for the SEC. It may be harder, honestly, because it wouldn't be shocking if the SEC disregards these things when making the schedule up. Lastly, at 16 is Vanderbilt. According to Dillinger, he believes the 3 permanent teams for Vanderbilt will be Tennessee, Ole Miss, Missouri. Based off winning percentage alone, these 3 teams are far better than Vandy, with a lowly 19.7% winning percentage. Puts Commodores with Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Missouri, who all sit in the mid-40s. Where does it go from there if you're making a schedule? If you give Vandy 3 permanent opponents like that, then you make up for a lower part by giving the Commodores 4 of the top 5 teams. The trickiest thing about each of these 3 examples is how do you approach a powerhouse, a middle-of-the-road team, and a bottom team going solely based on winning percentages over the last 10 years. These will all be situations that SEC must consider when making a fair schedule for all the teams, even if that's possible. Let us know what you think in comments below. Does the 3-6 system make its case of strong get stronger, weak get weaker? What other factors should the SEC consider when making a fair schedule? Is there too much emphasis on winning percentage, or is there another stat that we should be looking at here?